Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had the opportunity to enjoy some of that beautiful sunshine recently. We have plenty to talk about today, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our land acknowledgement, and then we will move forward from there. We would like to open this convening by recognizing that we are on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, the traditional home of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. We cannot work to fulfill our mission and our vision of an anti-racist present if we don't first acknowledge and recognize the true history and cost of colonization. However, acknowledgement is only a first step, and we urge you to engage in accountable relationships and informed actions. First, we have a few announcements. I hope to see you all on May 14th at the BHI Network Community Happy Hour at Metier Brewing Company in the Central District. Whether you've just started leaning in, you've been involved from the start, or you are learning about BHI for the first time, everyone is welcome. We'll provide opportunities to learn more about the entire network and how you can support it, and while we join in together for some community fun. The event is sponsored by Zillow, our BHI partner, and we thank them very much. They will be providing drinks and snacks that are hosted. So be sure to register today and grab your spot, and I hope to see you there. I will certainly be there. As a network, we are always looking to uplift all the voices and activities that further our shared priority to increase Black homeownership. So please be sure to reach out to me with any updates or info for the digest that might be good for the whole. And be sure to sign up for that weekly digest. Encourage others you know to do so as well. We want to continue to grow this network and our impact, and it's going to really take all of us doing everything we can to reach our shared goal. It's a network. There is no one in charge. The network is us. Invite more people in. All right, so today's meeting is a Seattle comp plan from head to toe. So we wanted to be sure to continue to dedicate time to this subject because the final comp plan will define the next 20 years of growth in our city, and it will affect whether or not our efforts to increase Black homeownership will be supported or hindered. So today we will hear from Brennon Staley from the Seattle Office of Planning and Community Development, also known as OPCD, about the anti-displacement, affordable homeownership, and community-led and owned development ideas that are in the recent comp plan draft. Brennon will also take your questions, so please do lean in with those questions. And Brennon is not able to record any of your comments that you have. Those need to be submitted through the city's email or the comment box that they've set up, but he will be able to help you understand better what is in the draft. Next, we'll review the Complete Communities Coalition letter to the mayor about the comp plan draft with Tiernan Martin, the co-chair of the Complete Communities Coalition. This is an organizational sign-on letter, and so we need to determine if BHI should sign on as BHI by the May 10th deadline. Finally, the comment period for the comp plan draft and the draft environmental impact statement, which is also known as DEIS, closes on May 6th. So we will discuss what input we as BHI should be sending to the city to influence that final environmental impact study and the final comp plan. And anything that's in that final comp plan will have had to have been studied for its environmental impact. So it really is important to comment on both of those elements. And I hope you're motivated by today's meeting to be able to do your own personal comments to the city by the May 6th public comment deadline. Because, if we want to see change, then we need to speak loudly, repetitively, let the city know what we would like. They are looking for your input. In our last 5 minutes, we'll open up the floor to just hear some news from you, and at 2 p.m. our meeting will conclude. But before we dive in, we're going to take just about 10 minutes to get to know one another a bit. We haven't been able to make space for this. And you know what? You make the space when you want to make the space. And I want to make it. I want us to get to know each other a little bit. I know a lot of you you're having your lunch, you're doing your things. So let's just give it a try. Our group's a little large sometimes for individual introductions by every person, but we can use the chat and we can also do some sharing out out loud from those who are ready to step in today. So the prompt is, share one thing about your own home that brings you joy or makes your home uniquely yours. So this could be a quirky decoration. It could be a favorite spot to unwind or a memorable moment. Again, we won't have time for everyone to share individually, but we can share in the chat. And we also do have time for a few people to, unmute and, go ahead and share aloud. So would anyone like to begin? Great, Cliff.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Cliff Coughlin, he, him. I am the Advocacy and Policy Manager for Habitat for Humanity of Seattle, King, Catas counties. And I mean, on a light note, one thing I enjoy about owning my own home is not having to worry, well, is being able to decorate. I like minimalist chic. My wife is more of a maximalist. We meet in the middle. And it's always an interesting negotiation. Besides that, on a serious note, one thing I do like is knowing that is being able to know that I can now plan on how to pass on this generational wealth and how to basically be able to teach my kids in the near, in the future, how to be able to own their own home. And, I've gone through the process, right? And it's really helped inform this work that I do. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Cliff, and so on topic as well. But anyone else want to step in and just, let us learn a little bit more about you today? I think sometimes we get into these meetings, we don't.
I will.
Excellent. Sounds good.
How you doing? My name is Nick. I'm one of the community outreach organizers from the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle. I go by he, him pronouns. And the favorite thing about my house, well, it's not a house, it's a condo, but I definitely like that I have a staircase like in the middle of the city, and I think that's pretty cool, I don't know what it is. It's like, when we grow up watching all the Christmas movies and all kind of like the romantic comedies, and then there's that one guy with the stairs in his house. That's kind of it. I don't know.
I can see what you're saying. There's an entire a section of architecture that is all about that fetish with stairs. So you are not alone in what you're saying. Thanks so much for sharing, Nick, and thanks for coming today. Sky, it looks like you'd like to lean in.
There we go. Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Sky Terrio. I'm a policy advocate with FMS Global Strategies. Live in Seattle area. And the favorite thing about my apartment that brings me joy is that it's a no couch apartment. So it's all 4-pillow style, and it really, every time there's people over, it encourages conversation style that's much more connected rather than kind of sitting next to each other does.
All right, I'd have to limber up, get down to the ground floor.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else want to share one thing about your home that brings you joy or makes your home uniquely yours?
I'll share.
Excellent. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. So I just bought a new house over the summertime, and I love old homes. It was built in 1936, and it has an expansive view of Western Washington, including downtown Seattle and downtown Bellevue from the Kent Scenic Hill. So I lived in Kent for 20 plus years and had no idea this area even existed. So makes me happy every day to watch the sun go down and see the view. It's really very calming.
I'm glad to hear that is a new part of your life, Nicole. You deserve all the calm.
I need it too. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to share? We're starting to lag in our bravery. We've got some inside the chat here. Well, I'll share something. I live up on Capitol Hill. I have some pretty tall windows in my living area, and it is kind of a pastime for myself, for my kids, and actually for my dog, that basically we at some point in a day, one day or another, we all end up just sitting there looking out the window and watching the people. It's pretty fun. So we're about 4 stories up, and that means we get to see expressions and interactions not so far away. And at the same time, it's an interesting bird's eye view. So we probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 more. I hope some of you will lean in and share. Oh, there we go. You got your hand up? You ready to go?
Oh, sorry about that. I was just going to say that I first got into homeownership years and years ago due to the untimely death of a parent who had 5 cats, and I had 2 cats. So I was quite literally the crazy cat lady with 7 cats for a number of years, which required being a homeowner in order to provide a healthy environment for 7 indoor cats. Happy to report now we have long since abandoned that. So, but it is nice to be able to have pets and not worry about whether or not somebody else will gainsay that decision.
Well, and I don't know if you've seen it, but I've seen these little videos around cat patios. People building like these entire infrastructure of multi-levels where their cat can, you know, exercise and do things. You know, that's pet love right there. That looks like a lot of weekends gone. All right, I have time for 1 more person to lean in if they'd like to and share.
So,
Sounds great. Hi, Loretta.
hi, especially this time of year. One of my favorite things is May because you get to see last year's flowers coming back and plant new ones. It's just exciting to know that because you own your home, you're able to plant roots, literally, and those roots come back up every year. And so as Mother's Day approaches, and happy Mother's Day, everyone, in Eastern Washington, at least, that's when planting season begins. So it's very exciting right now to get to see our gardens.
Thank you for sharing, Loretta. Well, that was great. I'm glad that we had a little moment here, and certainly look through the chat. There are people commenting there as well. So thank you for participating. I do hope you will all join us at the happy hour on May 14th so we can continue to connect and learn more about each other. But, you know, we have a few people here today to help us learn more about the comp plan. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome Brennon of OPCD to talk to us about the comp plan draft. Let me stop sharing here, Brennon, and then you can take it away. Oh, and I think you're muted right now. There
Hello,
you go.
thanks for having me. My name is Brennon Staley. I'm a strategic advisor with the Office of Planning and Community Development. My role in the comp plan is I'm the lead for the growth strategy and the zoning changes that we'll be doing. Nick Welch would be here. He's the one that's really been the lead for a lot of this placement work, but he had a second kid recently, and so he is on family leave for a little while. So I do have a presentation, which I'm going to share here. We tried to make it the presentation fairly short, so we have lots of time for questions. There's obviously a lot in the comp plan to talk about, but I'm going to want to hit on kind of the high level, the things that might be most important to this group. Just to make sure everybody's on the same page, the comprehensive plan is a 20-year plan for growth. We update it every 10 years, so this is a major update. It focuses on a wide variety of things. There's 13 different elements that deal with all different elements of a city. But probably the biggest change we're making is to the growth strategy and where we might allow more housing in particular throughout the city. Part of that is an anti-displacement framework, which actually is also a separate document. That document it basically has two major components. One, a discussion of how the growth strategy will create a more equitable city and address some of the root causes that we have for our homeless challenge. It also includes a review of existing anti-displacement tools, and then really a call asking, for feedback on what's working, what's not working, what could be improved. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the growth strategy of the plan. So first of all, just so you're aware that the growth strategy is really has two parts. One, it describes a series of place types that describe the role the different parts of the city will have in accommodating new jobs and people. It has a map that locates those. I'm not going to go into detail, but you can see that map on the side. The major change being that we're identifying a lot of new areas of the city that would be appropriate for apartment zoning, so that more neighborhoods in the city have a wider variety of housing options. So that is one of the major changes. We're also expanding some urban centers and villages, again, to create more opportunities for apartment zoning. The other major change, though, is that we are allowing more housing options in what we call neighborhood residential zones. So neighborhood residential is the majority of the city. It's those areas where you can build a detached home and some accessory dwelling units. We are doing a complete overhaul of that zoning, both to increase opportunities for housing choice, but also because we're required to under state law. So cities across the state are doing this work as well. The growth strategy includes a kind of a tailored approach based on areas that are high risk of displacement. When we talk about that, those are areas that have a higher prevalence of low-income households and communities of color, but especially those areas that historically were places that communities of color went when they weren't allowed in other parts of the city. So one, we are looking to kind of add and expand centers predominantly in low displacement risk areas to create more opportunity for housing there. But we also are proposing a different approach to zoning in neighborhood residential areas, which I'll talk about. And then lastly, the other thing I'm going to talk about is a new affordable housing bonus in those neighborhood residential zones. So there's a lot to that growth strategy. I won't go into the specifics, but again, the goals here are to create more opportunities for apartments and for smaller scale homeownership opportunities across the entire city. So the new neighborhood residential zones, again, we're comprehensively updating them. Our general approach is that we want to retain the 3-story height limit that already exists across those areas. We're also allowing a similar amount of floor area as what's allowed today, but what we're changing is the number of units that are allowed, and then we're reducing setbacks to make it more easy to accommodate those units. And so the idea there is there'll be a lot more flexibility for how you might want to build. We're also allowing people to subdivide units, so it's easier to, if you want to sell off a portion of your property to create more housing and then retain a portion, you can do that, or you can build yourself. But one of the key things, and I think one of the especially things we're looking for feedback on, is that we're proposing a different approach to those standards in areas of high displacement risk. And so you can see on the right is a map of kind of our initial thoughts on which areas we might apply those standards for high displacement risk. And that is, again, based on kind of more demographic information. We are also looking for feedback if are those the right criteria, if there's other places that should be included. So the basic difference is that in areas of low displacement risk, most of the city, we would allow 4 units on a 5,000 square foot lot. But in areas of high displacement risk, we would allow 3 units on a 5,000 square foot lot. In terms of floor area, which is the amount of floor area that we allowed, we would have a higher amount that's allowed in low displacement risk areas than in high displacement risk areas. So if you're tearing down a lot in a high displacement area, what you can build is a little bit smaller. But then there's a bigger bonus, so that if you preserve a home, you can do significantly more floor area. So I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like in practice. here are some examples of what might be allowed to develop on a 5,000 square foot lot under the proposal. These are examples of what that looks like if you build 4 units on a lot. So you can see 3 examples with different types of detached or attached homes, different kind of parking configurations. And so this is what would be allowed in kind of low displacement risk areas across the city. Oh, sorry, here's the title's wrong, but this is examples of what that looks like when you do 3 units on a lot. And you can see, the units, you have fewer units, but because the floor area is the same, they tend to be a little larger. So if you're doing kind of 4 units on a lot, they tend to be 2-bedroom units. If you do 3 units on a lot, they tend to be 3-bedroom units. And again, the reason for having this different approach in high displacement risk areas is that it really encourages the preservation of existing homes. There's really no way to do 4 units on a 5,000 square foot lot and save a home. But there is very possible in some cases to save a home and add 2 units in the back. You can see an example of that on the left. And then on the right are some examples of what would happen if the home wasn't preserved and you built. So this would be, we might see in low displacement risk areas, I got a mixture of things, but this would be the maximum that would be allowed in those high displacement risk areas. We've been just what we've been hearing on that approach. There's some of the pros are that it could encourage the preservation of existing homes. It also sends a signal to the development community that to focus on other areas if you're interested in a tear down and replace model. We have also been hearing some cons of that approach. One is that it could reduce the potential sales price of existing homes. Basically, if you're not allowed to build as many units, or if you're slightly more limited in the floor area, that might mean if developers are interested in your property, they might be willing to pay a little bit less. And specifically, some concerns from people that in homeowners in areas that have already had a history of of where people of color have been pushed, that lower sales price could be problematic. Also, if people do choose to demolish buildings, it could result in fewer larger units if redevelopment occurs. So we're hearing some real pros and cons. Honestly, I think we've been hearing more on the con side to date, but this is a really important issue to us, and we're especially interested in kind of thoughts on what that balance is and did we get it right. So that's a little bit about neighborhood residential zones and that kind of unique approach to high displacement risk areas. I also want to talk about another thing we're adding, and that is an affordable housing bonus for neighborhood residential zones. So again, in these zones today, you can build to 3 stories. Under our proposal, we continue to build to 3 stories, and you can have up to 4 units on that kind of 5,000 square foot lot. However, if you build a building that has significant amount of low income rent and income restricted units, then you'd be allowed to have an extra story, and you'd be able to have more dense, more units and more floor area as well. And basically twice as much floor area as you'd be allowed otherwise. And so the idea there is that it could help nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity, if they wanted to build a more condo style building in our neighborhood residential zones. We don't have a specific proposal yet for what the affordability requirement would be. That is in large part because the social housing developer is still getting up and run. So they're still kind of working on what they think their model is. And so we want this to work both for nonprofits and for that social housing developer. Next, I'm going to move on from talking about the growth strategy and the zoning aspects onto the anti-displacement toolbox. So the anti-displacement toolbox is today really a review of the existing tools that we have in place. And those are in 9 different buckets. One is producing and preserving affordable housing. That is through OH's funding opportunities, as well as the mandatory housing affordability program, which requires new development to contribute towards affordable housing. Protecting tenants, and there's a wide variety of programs in there. The tenant relocation assistance program, the economic displacement assistance program, a lot of tenants' rights things such as right to counsel, etc. Supporting homeowners to stay in and thrive in place. A lot of that has to do with OH's programs to help homeowners with keeping up with maintenance and improvements, as well as things like our property tax exemptions. Investing in community ownership of development and land. Those are again primarily through our grant making opportunities, both through OH's affordable housing programs, as well as the Equitable Development Initiative, which helps to buy land for community organizations. We also are working on an equitable transit-oriented development program. We're looking kind of strategically what we can do in key areas that are having new light rail, etc. Creating pathways to return, which obviously is focused a lot on the new programs that allow priority community preference policies for priority for people who might return to areas that they used to be in. Expanding pathways to opportunity. Obviously, there's a wide range of economic development work that we're doing to make it easier for people to afford jobs. Keeping businesses and cultural anchors in place. That's both things like the Equitable Development Initiative, but also the Cultural Space Agency, which is helping arts organizations purchase land so they can stay in place. Ensuring equitable benefits from public investment. These are things both like the Department of Transportation has a new program about how they help businesses that during construction, as well as things like priority hire to ensure that local residents are participating in city jobs. And then lastly, fostering community connection and sorry, I can actually see the rest of it. It's on my screen. But anyway, it's a wide variety of programs we have around building community, social services, arts, etc. So that really is a kind of a description of what we have in place today. I think important to note that currently there are no proposal for new funding to add new things or to increase funding for these things within the comp plan. But we are asking for feedback on what things we should be considering, obviously both part of the comp plan, but also as part of the budgeting process. Looking at, does the draft plan's growth strategy address the root causes of Seattle's displacement crisis? Should we approach potential zoning changes in areas with high displacement risk differently? But then also, what strategies are most important for the city to prioritize to prevent displacement as we implement the One Seattle plan? And are there new or different ideas about how the city can effectively combat displacement as we grow over the next 20 years? So we're looking really for feedback on obviously both the growth strategy, but also on what things we need in our to either expand or add to our anti-displacement toolbox. So I have one last slide, and that is just a little about community-led and community-owned development. Obviously this is an important part of our overall strategy, although it's not an area in which the comp plan has, substantial new things. We do have a number of goals and policies that support that. That is a key part of our vision. But those goals and policy are primarily implemented through other mechanisms. Obviously, OH's funding opportunities, the Equitable Development Initiative, the Equitable TOD work, which again is looking at very specific communities and how we can try and foster community-driven development in those areas. And then, of course, OH's work on supporting existing homeowners. So those are my slides. I know it's a really fast overview of a lot of things. So I'm happy to open up and either talk more about specific things or answer questions.
All right. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and open up the floor here. If you've had the opportunity to maybe go to one of the other open houses, or if you have seen some other presentations, this is just, additional information, something that's in the plan itself as well. But right now we have at our disposal someone who can answer some questions for us. And no question is a bad question. So please step in. Sky?
Yes, so my question is primarily wondering what focus in the growth plan is, if any, designed to address the homelessness crisis we're facing in our city, to both, repair the damage that's being done currently, as well as preventative measures to make sure that we don't reach this state again.
Yeah. So, so the plan primarily addresses that in creating capacity to build housing in order to, to both to address the competition for, housing that is driving up prices and is a major component of the homelessness crisis. And it is doing that, one, through creating a lot more capacity for apartment zoning, which are the places where, permanently supportive housing tends to be built. So trying to create more capacity for that. Obviously just trying to increase the supply of housing generally as well. Obviously, that is only a very small part of the overall program that we're moving forward to address homelessness. The plan does have it takes a lot of the things that are actually in other plans. So there's a lot of plans out there that go into much greater detail about what our approach to homelessness is. And it kind of takes those high level goals and integrates them into the comprehensive plan. But it's not doing it's not necessarily going to result in more funding in and of itself, or a different strategy to homelessness, but rather, it's taking that existing strategy, codifying it, and then adding the components of the growth strategy, changing the growth strategy to help augment it, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
And Brennan, maybe this is a good opportunity for you to provide some clarification. What does the comp plan result in, right?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes it's difficult for us to understand, is this where I should be asking for a funding source for X? Or is this really just going to be like the zoning rule that says you can build this or you can't build that? And there's overlap, as you've been speaking. And as you read through the document, there are many, many goals in it.
Yeah.
And those goals touch on a lot of things. And so in order to make sure that our impact in our comments is helpful, can you just speak a little bit about what it doesn't do, what it does do, and whether or not there's a problem regardless for you to put your comments in there, because it all kind of meshes together.
Yeah, that's a super good question. Yeah, so the comp plan is it can be difficult to figure out how to interact with it because, again, it's comprehensive. It deals with a wide variety of things, but necessarily it's also very high level. And I think really when it gets to the comp plan is very detailed when it gets to a growth strategy, because it's that's a unique role. There's nothing else that deals with our growth strategy. When it gets to other aspects of the work we do, it tends to be very high level. And so, for example, transportation, there's a whole Seattle transportation plan that gets into incredible detail about how they want to fund those things. And we would take those goals and policies and we roll them up and kind of talk about how they are balanced with other things. But the comp plan isn't going to redo that, nor is it going to redo OH's funding strategy or any of those things. So I think that, if you have something you want to see done in the city, I think that's all that is in bounds for, comments. Please, if there's something that we need to do, please give those comments. But I do think it is important to note that, this is kind of the overarching policy plan, and then we have implementation plans in almost every area. And so, if your thoughts are about something detailed, like this is how OH should be funding these types of projects, it is probably important to note the comp plan is probably not going to be able to do that. Rather, we can take that, we can pass it on to those people who are doing those implementing plans to make sure those are considered as part of that work. I don't know if that's helpful. That's pretty vague, but
I think the solution is say what you need to say and
yes.
Let the city work it out. Cliff.
Yeah, thank you, Brennan, for your presentation. So going back to the bit on high displacement risk areas, you mentioned strategy around that, and I guess one of the questions I have is, have you studied the impact of that strategy on potential projects that would support home ownership?
Yeah. Okay. So first, our strategy around high displacement risk is two things. One, trying to create a lot more capacity in areas of low displacement risk areas by especially capacity for apartments in neighborhoods that traditionally have very little of that housing type. And then the second is the kind of the tailored approach to our neighborhood residential zones, those kind of lowest capacity zones. Are you interested in both of those, or?
So why don't we start with, I mentioned high capacity areas. Oh, sorry, high displacement risk areas. So yeah, let's talk about the neighborhood residential zones and high displacement risk areas.
Yeah. Well, so we have done maybe very high level studying. We do an economic feasibility analysis of the potential outcomes in neighborhood residential zones. And I think what we found is that there's a less feasibility of development in high displacement risk areas generally, because those are just places where often result in lower sales prices. Obviously, there's a big difference between like the Central District and Rainier Beach. There's a lot of variety. Overall, that approach probably would reduce the amount of development that is feasible in those areas, but not by a huge margin. It is more marginal, and it would result probably in more situations where existing homes are preserved, result in more situations where those homes would be larger, more like 3-bedroom units rather than 2-bedroom units. That would happen. That would probably be the norm. Would be that the units would be that resulting units would be larger. But we don't have like maybe an exact numbers about what that would be like. I think it is also important to note that the difference between a homeowner who might be producing market rate units that or a larger provider that's doing income restricted units. Obviously, I think the income restricted units would use the bonus, and so I think there's a much more potential. For homeowners, that is more difficult. And then lastly, I guess in terms of, we haven't done any analysis about how would they think this would work out for a nonprofit. Obviously, we've been in conversations with you guys and HomeSite about it a little bit, but we don't have any kind of economic analysis, because that's really not something that we understand. How you pull together all those different funding streams to make it work.
Right.
Certainly interested in having that conversation if it'd be useful.
Yeah, for sure. And just an FYI, I just got the nod. We'll probably be sending in our comment letter today. And one of our major concerns with that is not the preservation part, but quite frankly, there are not enough units to go around. Like, there needs to be a balance between preservation and producing enough units for first-time home buyers. I also live in Kent, and for the decade I have lived in Washington State has been primarily in Seattle, and only in the last several years have I lived in Kent. And if I go back to where I used to live in the Rainier Valley, but all three places in South Seattle in particular, basically a lot of folks have either moved away or have found homes outside of the city to meet their needs. So particularly, in terms of starting families, just first-time home ownership opportunities. So I say all this to say that I think while this is an amazing effort on your part, and we appreciate it, that there needs to be more work put in when really analyzing the different components and thinking about how to balance preservation while also producing new homes for folks who have, quite frankly, for the community that's already been pushed out and being pushed out as we speak right now. And I should also add that, you know, part of like the work that we're doing in the Rainier Valley, for example, you know, is partnering with OH and also other organizations to build new units. So, you know, yeah, long story short, we're definitely up for that conversation. And that's like part of the feedback we'll give.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And then Eric, I see your hand up.
Hey. Thanks, Brennan, for this presentation. I'm really excited that this group gets to hear that. I've got a few questions just for my understanding, and I've read through the plan a few times. Is there an analysis of how many homes the growth strategy will accommodate? Sort of if everything gets built where it could. So question one. Question two, how does that track to what we understand the need to be over the time period that the comp plan, what is it, just 20 years, right? So that's question two. And question three, where in the plan or are there places in the plan where it goes above and beyond what the state is requiring us to do, and sort of help me understand that interplay, especially maybe where it could be density bonuses for affordability?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I think it's important to note that it is very, very difficult to predict how many units will get built. There are so many things that go into that, from interest rates to how much population happens, to like what does our permitting system look like. So we don't really have kind of like the number. This is how many people are going to move here, and this is how many units are going to get built. We don't have concrete numbers for that. We do have concrete numbers for development capacity, the number of units that could theoretically be built. Although, those numbers are very rough right now because we have a generalized growth strategy and not a zoning proposal. As we come out with a zoning proposal, we'll have more concrete ones. So, overall, it's clear that what we're doing would increase the development capacity in the city by at least 25%, probably more. And so probably that would mean that, that the number of homes we would produce would be built at least 25% more. The King County Growth Management Council does say that we have to plan for at least 80,000 units. Again, that's an at least. And so obviously we want to make sure there's capacity well beyond that. And so, I think that, again, if we think that this is going to be producing at least increasing by 25% the number of homes that are used. But all those are very rough. In terms of how it relates to demand, there are so many different ways to calculate demand. And I think it is especially challenging for a city because this is a regional housing market. There are, I think, a lot of good studies out there that suggest that the regional demand is that we're probably short on the scale of 100 to 150,000 homes in the region. But we don't have a specific number. How much is that in Seattle? So, I think obviously we know we're way behind, and we want to catch up as much as we can while still also, making space for all the new people and the new babies that are born here. Sorry, and then your last question, I forgot it already.
Sorry, the second question was actually two questions too, because I'm just a fan of the run-on sentence. Is sort of where in our plan does it go further than what the state requires us to do, asterisks, especially are we able to go further, especially in the density for affordability portion.
Yeah. So the only thing that we are required to do under state law is to implement HB 1110, and that is allowing at least 4 units on every lot in the city. Again, with this minus high displacement areas where we have flexibility. So that's the only thing that we're required to do. So obviously we're doing that. We're also doing other changes in neighborhood residential zones. like changing our setbacks to make more flexibility, updating, other things as well. The affordable housing bonus is not something that there's also a requirement for, you have to allow 2 more units on a lot if they're affordable. But we're going well beyond that, and by allowing an extra story and more floor area. And then, of course, the major change is that we are creating all these new neighborhood centers and expanding urban and regional centers. And basically, within all those areas, anything that's currently zoned neighborhood residential would be rezoned to an apartment zone, kind of generally 4, 5, 6-story buildings. And that will substantially increase our capacity for stacked flats, both apartments and condos.
And Brennan, we're running out a little short on our time together here. So I just want you to delineate for people the process that's happening. So right now, OPCD has put out a draft. And they've said, here are our goals, and here's how we think we may be meeting them. This intersects with a lot of other things. Secondly, prior to this, there was a process of an environmental study to say, what can we do in our city and what impact might it have? Now, these are not one-to-one things. What you have in your plan that you have as a draft is absolutely stuff that is coming from the environmental impact study, but it doesn't mean that you carbon copied alternative 5 or alternative 4. You created your own little recipe, but you have things that are studied. However, as you're taking public comment, people are saying, you know what, push this or do that. And if you want to explore it, it will need to be studied for its impact and inform your final plan. That will then be translated into actual zoning rules. And what happens with community input around that? Because right now we have till May 6th to kind of give our statements about the study and what they think is showing in that study for the impact, and what you're suggesting through OPCD as a draft. Let's get it started. But there are going to be other opportunities down the road. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, once the comment period closed, we'll obviously kind of, bring all that data information together, kind of look through what we're hearing. We will also create a engagement summary, as well as having all the raw data available to the public. With all that, we will update the growth strategy that we have, the proposal for neighborhood residential zones, the anti-displacement strategy, and we will come out in October with a set of zoning maps. So basically, for block by block, everywhere in the city, you'll have a proposal for what would the zone be here, what would that mean in terms of height and floor area, and have pictures you can see what that would mean. And so we'll have another engagement period in kind of October, November, December period to get feedback on that. Then we'll go and actually create legislation that would go to council in 2025. It probably actually will be 2 pieces of legislation, one that implements the changes to HB 1110 for neighborhood residential zones, because that has to go faster, and then one for everything else. And so that legislation will go to council. Council will have their own engagement period, and they will make amendments to that, and then they'll vote on it, and it will go into effect.
Okay.
So there's 2 more periods of engagement, really.
That's right. So definitely, put that in your fall calendar. We'll be stepping in there as well. So remember, it's not an all or nothing, right? That you want to get your comments in as much as you can, because that's part of the process of getting to somewhere you want to be. But there are going to have to be other engagement opportunities, and there will also be engagement with the council. And then, Brennan, I think you hinted at this in your presentation, but I'm just going to amplify it. When we're talking about the anti-displacement strategy that you have for triplexes, we're understanding the intention. You're saying lowest hanging fruit, cheapest property. These are going to be most likely in the high displacement areas. And so outside developers are going to want to take those. And if they're able to build the fourplex, then they're going to want to build the fourplex. It's going to cost less and make more profit for them. At the same time, we're trying to save existing communities. And when an existing community member wants to maybe redevelop their property, they're going to also be limited to that triplex standard. But we can ask for more surgical intervention. We can say things like triplex if you don't have an owner-occupied unit in your new development.
Mhm.
Triplex, if you didn't partner with a community partner. Triplex, if you don't have an affordable housing element partner in it. So there are ways that we can kind of surgically intervene with that broad stroke that you've made. We understand the intention, but there's always the potential for unintended consequences. And we can also ask you to study those, to tell us whether you're going to see displacement increased or decreased by your anti-displacement idea.
Mhm.
Right. And
Yep.
so we will be looking for those as we move into the fall.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Brennan. I know there are many more questions people may have. Certainly they can reach out and we could forward those to you. We will also keep talking about this subject for the rest of this meeting. So I hope you'll stay here because as we talk through the next two sections, we're going to learn a lot more about the comp plan. And Brennan, I hope I don't know what your plan is, but you are absolutely welcome to stay and hope you will. Again, Brennan is here to give us that little bit of a presentation. He answered a few questions, but comments are going to be something that you do through email or through the comment box. So we're going to go ahead and move forward here. Thank you, Brennan. And we're going to ask Tiernan to come in from Complete Communities Coalition. And you know what? I bet I'm going to need to make you a co-host so that you can share. There you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Bambi. And how much time do I have for my presentation? I know we're kind of getting...
You're okay. We're still at 12 minutes, 15. We could push it a little bit.
Okay, super. Well, before I share my slide, hi, everyone. My name is Tiernan Martin. I'm the Director of Research at FutureWise. We are a nonprofit organization that works on land use policy across Washington State. Our main office is based here in Seattle, and I am co-leading a coalition called the Complete Communities Coalition, along with Jesse Simpson from the Housing Development Consortium. And so I'm here mainly to talk about that coalition's work on the Seattle Comp Plan. And I've got a short presentation that I would love to share with you all. Okay, can you see that? Great. All right. So who and what is this coalition that I just described? The Complete Communities Coalition is a big tent. We sort of have a wide spectrum of members on our steering committee that we think really span the kind of local political views. And while our steering committee members don't agree on every policy matter, what we all do agree on is that Seattle needs to build a lot more housing over the next 20 years across the affordability spectrum. Otherwise, we're going to be in really tough shape come 2044. And so this major update that the city is doing to its comprehensive plan, we think is an excellent opportunity for the city to take action and for our elected leaders to really show that they understand the needs of our community when it comes to planning for a lot more housing and planning for different types of housing than what we have in the city today. So we formed this coalition in order to engage on the comprehensive plan, in order to help bring other people to this process, in order to simplify things and explore ideas and come together and speak with one voice. And so the coalition will dissolve after the comp plan is done. But right now we're really in kind of like the height of activity because of this comment period that Brennan and Bambi were just talking about. So we have a website. It includes some of our general goals and policy priorities. It talks about who's on our steering committee. You can take a look at it. It's www.completecommunitiescoalition.org. But what have we been doing? Well, we have kind of an inside and an outside strategy that are both working in tandem. And that outside strategy is, like I said, getting people to come to the city's events and be generally aware that this plan is being updated. So we have been going to all of the open houses that the city has held. They did, I think, a total of 8 open houses, 7 of them in person and 1 virtual. There was also a couple of comment hearings about the draft environmental impact statement that we participated in. And at those, we are both giving comments, but we are also listening. What are the types of questions that other folks are asking? Which elected officials are there and how are they participating in the process? Just getting a general sense for like what is the vibe, if you will, around planning for growth and development in the next 20 years. On the other side of our strategy, the inside track, we are also really working hard to reframe growth as something that our elected officials can lean into and show their leadership on. For folks who have lived in the region for a long time, you are probably well aware that in the past, making major changes to land use and housing policy in Seattle was not always a recipe for political success. And we desperately need that type of action. So one of our missions is to work with the key decision makers throughout the comprehensive plan update process. Those decision makers are right now the mayor of Seattle. Then eventually the mayor's recommended plan will get transmitted to the city council. And at that point, our key decision makers are the council members. They are the ones who, at the end of the day, actually adopt the legislation that implements the new comprehensive plan. And so we're working really hard to think about, how can we build relationships with those leaders? How can we help meet their needs? What are the educational gaps that we can help fill? And then how can we help them find their priorities where they match up with ours, which are, plan for a lot more homes throughout the city. So we have written the slide on the screen is an example of this inside strategy at work. It is a sign-on letter to Mayor Harrell, the current decision maker at this stage of the plan, sort of laying out some high-level goals that we have as a coalition, but also we're trying to get a lot of signatures from other groups to sign on with us. And we would love it if you all would consider signing on. So what I wanted to do is just sort of unpack each of these ideas that we have one by one. So the first one is allowing for family-sized homes in middle housing areas. So what do we mean by this? Well, we sort of take what the city has proposed in its draft plan and think about, is this likely to produce the type of homes that work for larger households, possibly ones with children and or elders living there, multi-generational households, that sort of thing. And what we see is some opportunities to add bonuses for homes that have more than 2 bedrooms. That's one way that we can incentivize the private market to build the type of homes that work for larger families. And so we propose a bonus that the city could consider making available. Next is sort of talking about where we allow multifamily housing in general, particularly as it relates to our transit network. The city's approach right now is somewhat scaled down. It would just allow these type of apartments and condos along the streets where transit runs. So if your property is touching that kind of wide arterial street, you can build a 4 or 5 story apartment building or condo building there. But if you move off of that street into the blocks around it, you wouldn't be able to. And we think that that's a missed opportunity because all those people that could live close to that transit stop, but not right on the street, won't have the opportunity to live there unless they are lucky enough to own or rent one of those smaller, lower unit count homes. So we would like to see the boundary of our transit corridors expanded to be anywhere within a 5-minute walk of a bus that runs frequently. So that's another idea that we are asking the city to consider. Similarly, when it comes to these new types of centers that the city is introducing, Brennan kind of glossed over it a bit. They've got a regional center type and an urban center type and a neighborhood center type. Neighborhood centers are the smallest and they're brand new. So the city has proposed 24 of these kind of little clusters of commercial businesses with apartments on top in places where right now you mainly find detached residences, maybe a couple of existing commercial businesses, but nothing like density. And so we think that that's a good a step in the right direction. But the city has been, in our opinion, a little conservative in the amount of these that they've proposed and in the size of them. They are proposing 800 feet radii for these centers. So it's like not even like a full block, or maybe it's like a block and a half from the center. We would like to see a much larger area in order to get the kind of density, enough people living there to support the businesses that would be built on the ground floor, that sort of thing. So we want to see bigger neighborhood centers, and we want to see like double. So not 24, but 48 or 50 of these. And thankfully, the city has studied some of that, as I'll get to in a minute. Next, none of this is going to work if we don't have community members participating in the development of their own neighborhoods. So promoting equitable development and coming up with a really rich set of tools to prevent displacement while still ensuring that communities are invested in. And so we have some ideas for ways to do that. Generally, our approach is provide a set of incentives and development bonuses or exemptions that allow communities to do their own development or just encourage affordable units to be built on site when a property redevelops. Talking pretty high level there, but there's a little bit more detail in some of our other documents. The last one is really specific. It's just talking about these centers, the regional and urban centers. Right now they have a variety of different zones, and what we would like to see is the ability to develop some high-rise housing in the zones that currently are too short to allow that. There's a lot of really sort of exciting development happening with wood frame construction that can be built very tall in a safe and fireproof way. And so we want to see the city get ahead of that and permit that type of development where it's feasible. So those are the 5 ideas that you'll see listed in our sign-on letter. We have a lot more kind of like very detailed policy language that we think is important, but that we're not asking every group to sign on to. So feel free to get in touch if you want to see a copy of our more detailed comment letter. The switching subjects a little bit here, for folks who are brand new to this, you may not have heard about these sort of different drafts of the comprehensive plan, but for some of you, this may be something you've already heard about. So, we are all responding to the official draft plan that was released in March. That's what this comment period is focused on, in addition to the draft environmental impact statement. But some local journalists did some digging and uncovered that there was a previous version of the draft plan that looks really different and that has different sort of like policy language in it. And so, that's an interesting finding. And a lot of us are interested in seeing sort of like what was in that earlier draft and what changed between last August or so and March. And when we do that comparison, what we see is generally a lot less development proposed for the neighborhood residential areas. So there are fewer of those neighborhood centers planned throughout the city. The definition of what a transit corridor is got shrunk really dramatically to just be on the street. And there's a couple other kind of examples of that reduction. Similarly, the language that talks about the history of planning and development policy and the disparate effects it's had on Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. The original plan talks about how that's happened in the past and how it continues today, but the plan that was released in March kind of omits that how it affects us today part. And so that's significant and something that you can, ask them to re-examine. Similarly, Brennan did a great job of sort of running down the list of anti-displacement strategies that are in this recent draft plan. But in the one that was created and shared with the mayor's office in August, there's a bunch of examples where staff have suggested ways to improve on these strategies. And there's a lot of really good ideas in there that we think the city should reconsider. So just to kind of show in a little bit more detail some of these things. What we've got here on the left, this is the draft plan that was released in March 2024. This is that overall growth strategy. Brennan already kind of walked us through this. Here on the right is what the August 2023 growth strategy looked like. And the colors are a little bit different here, but what you'll notice if you kind of quickly look at these, there's a lot more of those little blue dots. I think they had something like 50 instead of 24. And then the kind of darker yellow strips are much wider. Those are the transit corridors. They include a couple blocks on either side of the transit streets instead of the very skinny ones that we see in the draft plan that was released in March. There's a bunch of other kind of like examples of changes that were made between last August and March, but these are significant changes in like where development would be allowed over the next 20 years. So we think it's worth paying attention to. Similarly, when it comes to that anti-displacement toolkit, you know, what staff heard during the environmental impact statement scoping was, you know, asking for more growth in an equitable way, asking the city to partner with community-based organizations and leaders in designing how those anti-displacement strategies should work, and for new and stronger anti-displacement tools. But that's not exactly what we have in the plan that we're responding to. What we have is a reiteration of what is going on today. And so an example of where an earlier draft went above and beyond, in their invest in community ownership and development of land strategy, they had things like explore city-led land banking, explore city-supported community land trusts, look for ways to support community ownership of real estate and land, and like really maximize the amount of development that the city's public development authorities are able to do. Those are all interesting suggestions that we think should probably be considered in the anti-displacement strategy and in the comprehensive plan document itself. So we're not sure why they were removed, but we think it would be good to add those ones back. So those are just a couple of, you know, I wanted to let people know that there were these couple of plans, versions of the same plan out there with key differences. You're welcome to, you know, let the city know what you think about those two alternatives, or suggest ideas that are like not included in either, right? And so how do we do that? We've already touched on this a little bit. There is a comment period that's going to close on Monday, the 6th. So we've only got a little bit of time left for you to submit your comments, but you don't have to have like a really detailed comment letter. You can just, if you've got one or two good ideas, you can go and share those. Like, and you should do that. They don't have to be like professionally written. In fact, if they just tell your experience and what you want to see in your own words, in some ways that can be more impactful. So I would highly recommend that. Second thing you could do is, as an organization or representing your own individual kind of like group or org, you could join us in sort of sending a letter to Mayor Harrell that identifies those 5 policy alternatives and generally says like, this is a great opportunity, Mayor. You should go big on this. This is really important to us. So there's a link to a Google form where you can add your name and the organization that you represent and authorize your signature on our letter. We would greatly appreciate that. And then lastly, HDC is hosting the Affordable Housing Week in early May. It's an amazing program with events and activities all throughout the week. But in the kickoff event on May 13th, we will be having a discussion with Mayor Harrell and some of his city staff and regional leaders, and a great presentation by a scholar named Jenny Schutz. And so we would love for you to come and attend that activity as well. And with that, I think I've made it all the way through the slides in a little over 15 minutes. Would love to take any questions.
And just to reiterate, what we're looking to do is have BHI sign on as one of the organizations in the organizational letter that Tiernan walked through, which basically kind of fell in two categories, similarly to what we heard from Brennon. There are things that have to happen in those high opportunity, low displacement risk areas of the city that increase that density and take the pressure off of the high displacement areas. And then there are things that need to be happening as well to encourage affordability, to encourage community involvement and input in what is developed. And that's kind of the two buckets of everything, in everything really, where you're like, there's an ecosystem, and the more that we have more housing, then the less pressure we have in those, push point areas. If there aren't any current questions for Tiernan, we will go ahead and make sure that if there are that come up, send them to me. I can pass them on and make sure that Tiernan can come out and, set back a response to you. But thank you so much for that, Tiernan. And we're all set. We're going to move on to our next section. We hope you will stay. I know this is a lot of information and we're doing it in these 3 sections and they're each really meaty. I am going to record this. You could rewind. So I'm going to move forward here real quick, just sharing my screen again, so that we can talk about this last little part we're going to touch on. So BHI was one of the handful of organizations that were referenced in the comp plan document. We've been working really hard to share our BHI goal with policymakers, and it feels like we're being heard. So we do have the city's ear, and we want to use this connection to influence the final comp plan and support our shared priority. So I have attended myself several presentations by OPCD, and I've been cataloging the questions and the comments that I've heard from BHI team members, from BHI partners, and from other community groups that are in the BHI network. And I've compiled a list of recommendations that advance our BHI shared priority. And I'm looking for input from you to know if this working list that I've started is kind of on the mark or completely off the mark, or missing something really obvious. So we do have a couple of different opportunities to provide input, as everyone has said. The public comment period closing on Monday, May 6th, for both the draft and the environmental impact statement. And I hope you will all take advantage of that and send your personal comments. But it is also important for BHI to weigh in at this moment. So the input being received now is going to shape that conversation the city has over the next month or so as they move forward with the next steps towards the final comp plan. And again, there will be opportunities for further public comment input in the fall after they have had the opportunity to work through the input received. But if we wait for then, we may not see additions that we would have liked to see included. So we will certainly be leaning in during the fall as well. But we want to make sure that this final idea that they're bringing forward in the comp plan, that they're going to create the zoning rules for, we want to make sure that we're shaping that version. And that's why we want to act now. So you all did receive the working document with possible input items in it. And I can put a link at the end here in our chat so that you can get to that document as well. But basically we have 8 items and we're just going to kind of go through in 4 slides the different items. And what I'm really looking for is, absolutely red flag, I need to say something, please do. That's what I'm really, really hoping for. The ones that are in there that are like, why would we want to say that? Why would we support that? That doesn't work. So this first comment here is looking to get to pathways that can realize the goals outlined in the comp plan draft, right? The wording and the intention in the draft is spectacular, but if we don't see pathways that are created to make those intentions a reality, then they have very little meaning. So again, as we talked before, the comp plan can't do everything. We're definitely going to be able to see the direction and the boundaries in which the further legislation will be able to work. So what we want to do is we want to let the city know we want certain outcomes and we want those outcomes to be planned for. So we have more work later to get to that funding and process for successful realization, but believe it or not, this is kind of a first step. So in this first comment here, number 1, we are focusing on trying to think about the mechanisms of actually realizing the intent. Looking at something like a density bonus, regulation flexibility, land incentives, the technical assistance to even know if you could do something or should do something. And so does anyone have any concerns to share that is in the language of this particular item? And I know that some of you may not have had the opportunity to go through this. There's a lot of stuff here, but in essence, it says, what are the mechanisms to make affordable home ownership real, to make affordable rental production real? What are we going to do with community-based owned and led development? When we have our legacy homeowners, how are we helping them to redevelop their property and create affordable housing units for themselves, their family members, current and past legacy residents, so that we can bring people back into our communities? And if we have a non-legacy homeowner who has come into an area, they want to redevelop their property, can we help them to create permanently affordable housing where they'll be able to, take advantage of more bonus, more space, and be able to help bringing people back into our areas as well? So that is what this kind of number 1 is. I'm going to give it one more pause here for anyone to just kind of raise their hand and say something on here just doesn't seem right. And feel free to also email me afterward. Basically, what's going to happen is we have till Mondays to submit a letter from BHI. I hope you will, print it out, take it home, marinate on it, and reach out to me at any time so that I can understand if there's anything that needs to be, significantly changed. I'm going to move on to number 2. So in this comment, we're trying to capture the ecosystem that I was talking about. We see displacement pressure because there's a housing shortage. That drives up the costs, and then it leaves people with little housing choices. And of course, the formerly redlined and BIPOC communities see the brunt of this impact because more people look for that lowest cost place to live, to purchase and rent, and then there's displacement. So to counter this, we need everyone in every neighborhood to own their share of the solution. Far too long has the solution been, well, we'll just go ahead and gobble up all of that land that we had made sure didn't rise in price to the benefit of the people who had been there. But now that there's a big difference between different areas, and here we'll take it. So we don't want that to continue. And that was the legacy of what happened during our last comp plan. So we can't be pretending that we're living in a city where 75% of our buildable land can be reserved for a single family detached home reality, because that reality is not an opportunity that was shared for everyone in any equitable way. And it's also not a way that we're going to be able to absorb the people who live here and who want to live here. So we do need more housing choices available to a wide variety of incomes across the entire city. That is what we're talking about here. And that is that kind of scaling up where you already have high opportunity, making sure people are pitching in, doing their part. Any questions about what's on here or any flags here? A lot of what you're seeing on this slide is actually much of what you heard from Tiernan and is in the letter Complete Communities Coalition has. It's basically saying where we know that people want to live and development is happening, let's make sure that we are augmenting that because we want to take the pressure off of the areas that have always received the brunt. All right, we're going to move on to the next one if I'm not hearing anything here. So this is 3 different suggestions here, and they're getting at different things. So the first one here is the negative impact that parking requirements have had on housing development. Basically, we're asking for the parking mandate to be off the table. Developments can still have parking, and we know that they will because there is demand in the market for it. But the city creating barriers around housing in a housing crisis, around, you know, to have parking, isn't making a lot of sense, and definitely doesn't make a lot of sense. The city has already been very proactive about this, and there's a lot of the city where you don't have mandates already. So the idea would be like, let's just take it off the table. Let's let the market do what it's going to do. If parking is going to be built, it'll be built, but let's not make it an impediment to design. Number 4 here tries to set a minimum for the development standards for middle housing, one that at least aligns with the Washington State Department of Commerce model ordinance. So when that HB 1110 middle housing bill passed, which we were a big part of supporting, Washington State Department of Commerce had to figure out, what is that going to look like? What would a good size be for those things? What should that ordinance be? And there's a difference between what's in this comp plan and there. This comp plan is much less aggressive in its envisioning of how that law should be implemented. And we think that at minimum, we should be aligning ourselves with the Department of Commerce, who interpreted that law. And so we want to make sure that those standards get raised in the next comp plan. This would be a minimum. We're hoping for more. Item number 5 is somewhere I would really like y'all to kind of lean in. So this is that tricky conversation we keep having about the community input that's really needed around this idea of the triplex development standard when you're in an area that is at risk of high displacement. Of course, they want to ensure that developers wouldn't swoop in, that they're not, you know, incentivized by the lower price, and therefore, you know, come in and go for that fourplex. It's not a huge difference, the 3 and the fourplex, but there are significant impacts of that. But it does also mean that you'll end up in a scenario where you're going to kind of create barriers for those homeowners who are part of the community or community-based organizations who may want to redevelop. And so this is where I was asking, you know, about the idea of, can we be more surgical? Can we say something like, sure, maybe you have a triplex standard when we're talking about like an outside developer who swooped in, isn't going to have an owner-occupied unit, isn't working in partnership with the community, then maybe that makes sense there as a safety net. But really, actually, I think we want them to examine this more. We're not seeing a level of analysis that helps anybody make this decision. It's kind of we hope for. Our intent is good, but the intent and impact aren't always the same. So anyone out there in the room right now have, you know, just a very particular comment, Cliff?
Yeah, thanks for laying this out, Bambi. So basically in the coalition conversations, one of the things I've been really trying to advance is, or one of the one of the things I've been really trying to advance is that development does not necessarily mean displacement, and particularly when we're looking at a crisis that has in part been caused by reducing supply in order to maintain racially and socioeconomically exclusive, you know, enclaves historically, right? So with that, with the high displacement risk areas, one of the things that we, you know, one of the kind of conclusions we came to is a compromise, where the intention of the carve out is to protect those areas. So if that is the intention, the city considering a moratorium on allowing for you know, greater kind of mid-rise multifamily like housing types, like greater than triplexes, and then really doing extensive really having extensive conversations, not just with you know, the communities that are there facing displacement, but people who have already been displaced, and parts of those diasporas, particularly and specifically this being led intentionally by BIPOC organizations in order to, over the next couple of years, come up with a policy to address that. That being said, just one thing about your idea as well is I think just leading with like affordability in terms of creating more capacity is the best way to go. In terms of like specifics, I just have to think about what you said because the words are kind of jumbled in my head. But the intention is to stop this kind of predatory like development that a lot of people are calling out in communities that are at high risk of displacement. Yet, the reality is that we do need more affordable units in order to be able to allow people to enter into home ownership and have that being a definitive anchor against displacement, as well as just places where people can live, right? So, yeah.
And just to kind of make sure I understand what you meant there, you're saying the potential, one potential way to go about it would be to say, you can get above the triplex if there's affordability. That's already there for the sixplex, right?
Right.
You're just
Right.
saying affordability in the fourplex.
Yeah, and also I would say for us, and when I say us, I mean Habitat. One of the things we're going to suggest is that with affordability, you could even, add a couple of units to that sixplex. Make it like an eightplex, and just kind of cap it there. It kind of comes from a mutually shared philosophy within our team where it's like you should bargain high, right? Like go above and beyond and see where we can end up.
Okay, and Jesse?
Yeah, building off of what Cliff was just said, one of the things we've circled around recently is how the both the intent and legislative language of HB 1110 make it pretty clear that the anti-displacement carve-outs are intended to be for triplex zoning are intended to be temporary. Like Representative Reed said, maybe that temporary is a little while, but it's not intended as a in perpetuity. You can go less than HB 1110. So we've drafted a language saying that you should basically put in place, work towards a plan in which you are doing full HB 1110 implementation after appropriate anti-displacement policies are put in place.
All right, so that's a couple of different kind of, that's about 4 different ideas around that same scenario, but the common theme is that the idea has been put out there, but no one can really understand the ramifications of it because it hasn't been studied. So first and foremost, making sure that we're saying we want this impact to be studied before they start zoning in on what it is they want to do, right? And that will be an opportunity also in the fall, because if they are going to move forward with this idea or even amend this idea as per the suggestions they get, they're going to have to study it so that when we talk in the fall and we see this as a zoning change, they will have to be able to give us some idea of their predictability. That could also inform the idea of the time period that Jesse was, speaking about, or maybe about how you put in language around affordability, or a language around legacy homeowners, or a language around community, driven development. So a lot to think about there, but I think among all the comments that I've heard just this moment and also in other venues, it's really that people are saying, what is the impact going to be? We'd like to have you study this further as well. All right, well, we are getting to the top of the hour. That has been a lot. Again, I am going to invite you all to continue forward with connecting with me. I'm going to show you one other slide here. These are the 3 other items on the letter. One of them is basically saying we would like to see a land banking and land disposition process to support community-based development. Because we know that if they could help with that land coming out of the cost, that it puts the project in such a better space to become affordable and accessible. And then in the final environmental impact statement, we also want to see some data that isn't just across the city. You know, if these are things that are supposed to have disparate impacts based on displacement status or based on kind of a district or a neighborhood level, we'd love to see some of that broken up. And then the last one is, you know, OPCD has done a great job of visiting community groups to inform their draft. And we want to make sure that they are revisiting these groups in the fall to present their final environmental impact study and zoning changes that they're recommending, so that they can get new feedback, and also so that they are operating not in an extractive relationship, but in a generative relationship. You know, the open houses are great, but they don't always work for anyone's schedule. And when they have visited community groups that have a particular meeting time, it feels like they should really be doing that outreach to go back to those community groups and honor the gift of the information that they have been given. So that's what I have here are these 8 scenarios. Again, I will send a follow-up email, and I hope that you will think about this over the weekend. Send your comments and ideas to me by Monday at noon. So definitely we're in a timeline if we want to have a BHI letter sent for the May 6th. It's not the end of the world if it didn't happen, but again, this is a smart moment to be in the process. We could potentially just send a letter afterward that went, you know, to the mayor, to the director. But it would be great if we could get something in. And I hope you all will take a few moments over your weekend and put in your own public comments. The comp plan is going to keep going. So thank you all for joining, and I'll be sure to get the copy of this recording out to you. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you for being
too.
here.
Thank you.